all these habits that you have right now, all the things that you do every day, you didn't just all of a sudden start doing them, right? These have developed over time, a long time. So now it's really just having that awareness. So there's 5 things that I wrote down to talk about, just starting to look at your life and looking at the boundaries of where you could plug in boundaries to help give you more time, focusing on the things you want to focus on and increasing your level of satisfaction.
This is Lead with Culture. I'm Kate Volman, and we have a very special episode because we are talking about boundaries. We're talking about boundaries, and I'm joined by our senior coach, Michele Marquis. We talk to a lot of leaders. We're working with a lot of people that when they come to their coaching sessions, they have questions about, how do I get work-life balance in my life? I'm working too much. I miss my kids, or, all the things that we deal with when we are either running a business, leading a team, or even you're just part of a team and you have to navigate that personal and professional growth and living a satisfied and fulfilling life. Michele, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Kate. This is an awesome subject. I don't think there's ever been an executive that I've coached where this didn't come up.
What's interesting is a lot of times leaders will come to us and are looking for business coaching, which is great because we do that, but they are looking for business coaching and they're very specifically clear on, I want to build my team and grow the business. And that's really where they're focused. And then we dig in a little bit more on the first couple of coaching sessions. And what do we discover? They're off balance in their life. There's this level of they've lost a connection with their spouse or their kids, or maybe they really used to love going and playing golf or tennis or exercise, and they've really let those things go because they're so focused on building a business that we almost forget that those other areas of our life, we need to feed into those areas if we expect to grow the business, grow ourselves as leaders, grow the team. And so I love this topic, and it is definitely one that we don't talk about as often as some of the other things. And so I think this is going to be a really great conversation. And Michele has some wonderful questions for all of you listening to start asking yourselves to figure out where you are and where you can really grow personally and professionally. So, Michele, let's talk about it, because you were excited about this topic specifically because you just came from an event. And tell us a little bit about that conversation of the leaders that you were working with.
Yeah. So I went to a networking event and there were at least 25 women there. It's one of those networking, like you go to a different table after so many minutes. I think they call it speed networking. But one of the questions that we had to answer as part of us getting to know each other was, if you could accomplish one thing this year, what would you like it to be? And I have to tell you, whenever someone chose that question, because they could pick from 3, they said they wanted more life balance, more work-life balance. So I was really excited because I had brought some books with me that night, and Off Balance, the book that Matthew wrote, it's still appropriate today because, and you don't hear much about it anymore. However, that night it was highlighted throughout the evening and it became a huge topic. And these are executive women that either own companies or they're high level in their organizations. And I started asking them some questions. What would you like your life to be like if you could change whatever you're doing today? So we got into a really much deeper conversation, and it was really, bottom line is, you need a strategy for your life, right? You don't just wake up in the morning and go, wow, I hope it's going to be a great day. Because if you do, you're going to be disappointed. You need to be focused on those things in your life that you really want to work on or accomplish. So there's 4 questions that Matthew talks about in the Off Balance book. And all I had to do was start to ask these questions, and all of a sudden the whole room started buzzing, right?
Yeah. Well, wait, before you dig into the first question, I'm curious, when you started talking about this concept that we have to be more intentional and asking these women, what is it that you really want? Like, what was that response? Because what's interesting is that it's really easy when we ask people what they want for us to start talking about what we don't want. I don't want to feel stressed. I don't want to be anxious. I don't want to be overworked. But when we actually have to say, okay, but then what do you want? Like, what does that look like? It's a very different question, but one that kind of stumps people. We're used to talking about the things we don't want and what we're frustrated by and all the challenges in our life, instead of, wait a second, How do you want your life to look?
That's a great question. What you just said, they want time to do it all. What's the next thing you say, right? We all get 24 hours in a day. We have to choose what do we want to spend our time on. And then we started talking about energy and all that. That's what I'm going to get into on the 5 things to get started looking at the boundaries that you probably need to set in your life. This isn't like I'm going to sit down in 1 hour and figure this all out. No, that's not what this is about. If you think about it, right? Okay, I want more time. All right, what are you spending your time on right now? Where are you wasting time? And it's funny because, again, through the coaching, you start to identify little habits in yourself that you go, I didn't even know I was doing that. Because they're just all of a sudden, they just infiltrate into your life. And all of a sudden, you're doing them on a regular basis. Wasting time is such a big one for people, too. So the 4 questions are this, and this is just to ponder to get you started. What do you like about your life as it is today? Second question, what don't you like about your life as it is today? So those 2 things. And to your point, they probably jump to number 2 and say, these are all the things I don't like. But what do you like about what's happening right now? The third is, if you went to the doctor next week and you were told you only had 1 year to live, what would you do for the next year?
This is one of my favorite questions that Matthew asks because it really helps us shed a light. Like when we ask ourselves the question of what do we like in our life and what do we not like? Easy to say what we don't like. Maybe we have to be a little bit more challenged to really dig into what we do like. Because some of the things in our life that we like, we kind of have taken some of those things for granted. We don't think about them. And so I think this is such an opportunity for us to find more gratitude in those things that we do like and highlight those. But then this third question of what would you do in that year if you had 1 year? It's like 12 months. You have 12 months. What are those 12 months going to look like? And for us to really be able to hone in on what is most valuable to us in our lives and what we are able to build. I mean, think about what do you want to build and create? And when I say that, for some people, it might mean that they really want to continue to work and build a business that they can get and then give to someone that would be a legacy and other people can be served. Or it's, I would spend all of my time with my family. I would spend my time creating as many experiences as possible. And so to think about that, what a powerful question, and what a question to start getting us to dream again, because now we're thinking, okay, I actually can make time for some of these things. And if I only had 12 months, would I be spending 2 hours on Instagram or scrolling online or doing all the things that we do throughout the day just because that is just what we are now programmed to do? That's such a beautiful, powerful question.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure he said this, right? So great questions can change your life. So here's the last one. What is holding you back from the life that you really want? Could be fear, could be so many things, right?
When you're working with your clients on stuff like this, what do you feel is the most common answers? Is it more psychological or more kind of external?
I'd say most of the time it's gremlins. It's this little voice in your head that's telling you that's not right, that's not good. Someone who's a high achiever, they have to work 10 hours a day because when you work harder, you're better. When you work more hours, you're a better employee. It's that little voice, it's the gremlins. And in my generation, that's how we grew up, right? The harder you work, the higher you'll get. It's just not true. This is, again, a very great topic to really start thinking about. Where are you spending your time? Where do you want to spend your time? What's the level of satisfaction you want to achieve in your life, in all areas of your life, not just professionally, but personally, because you're not 2 different people, as Matthew says, right? If you're happy at home and you're satisfied in those areas of your life, you bring that person into the workforce.
Yeah. And I think today more people are having that conversation. I think with the past few years, the pandemic and everything that has happened, more and more people are recognizing, no, you're not a business you and a personal you. You are you. And when you are getting better in one area, you're going to start thriving in other areas. I mean, when you have more discipline in your workout or your routine in one area, it's going to start to spill over into some of the other areas of your life, which is so beautiful, which is why we need to continuously be learning and growing and developing. And to your point, be really intentional about what you want your life to look like. What are those skills that you really want to gain? And only when we are intentional can we then seek out the opportunities that are going to help push us to become that better version of ourselves.
Absolutely. And I like the way Matthew frames it also, is that it's a strategy or it's a system for your life. It's creating that strategy or system, being disciplined, having the self-awareness, being intentional about that every single day. I can't say that enough. And I feel like that's what coaching gives to people too, is it gives them that framework to really think about those things, because we don't take the time to think about them. We spend more time planning our vacation than we do our life.
Which is so crazy. So these are great questions to consider. Now, what typically happens when we hear a great question or we read a great book or watch a great video and we think, oh, that is impactful and I'm going to focus on that, and maybe you write it down and you think, okay, I'm going to be intentional, Michele. I'm committed, Michele. I'm going to be intentional about creating more of this work-life satisfaction, as Matthew calls it, in Off Balance, because it's not work-life balance, it's work-life satisfaction. And so they've taken some time and written all that stuff down. But then, the next day comes. We can't just unprogram our brain and all of our habits in a day. So what are some tips that you can share with people to really continue this proactive approach to becoming a better version every day?
Yeah. So it's definitely a commitment. All these habits that you have right now, all the things that you do every day, you didn't just all of a sudden start doing them, right? These have developed over time, a long time. So now it's really just having that awareness. So there's 5 things that I wrote down to talk about, just starting to look at your life and looking at the boundaries of where you could plug in boundaries to help give you more time, focusing on the things you want to focus on and increasing your level of satisfaction. So the first one, and we sort of touch on it, is really to know your priorities. Know what your priorities are. And whoever's coached with me knows this is like one of my favorite words, is know your non-negotiables. You have goals and aspirations and you're kind of flexible with those things, right? So if you don't have them, that's okay. If you don't get them, that's all right. For instance, like if you have a work schedule and you have to work till 5:30, well, I'd really rather work till 4:30, but you work around those things. But non-negotiables is, right? No, I have to pick up my child at 5 o'clock every day. So I must leave at 4:30. And it's having those conversations about what are your priorities and your non-negotiables. To me, that's the beginning of really looking at where boundaries need to play a bigger part in your life so that you can increase your level of satisfaction.
How many priorities should people focus on? Because this is another thing that we see often when we talk about priorities. It's just like a to-do list, right? It's sometimes we think, oh, what are my priorities? And all of a sudden you've got 10 different priorities. That means that it's not a priority.
Yeah. So that'll come out with some of these other steps, right? So as you start to really look at what you're actually doing today versus what you want to be doing, your priorities will start to become clearer and clearer. And that's why you can't have one coaching session. One coaching session is not going to get you where you want to be. That's why it's multiple coaching sessions. This is a lot to unpack. And especially if you've never thought about this, or if you've just been head down, running through your career and doing really well, you're very successful, and all of a sudden you pop up and you go, wow, 10, 20 years have gone by, and what have I done with my life? What have I really wanted to do? So the second one is, and this is specifically for work people, right? Leaders specifically, what are your responsibilities as the leader? Are there things that maybe you can delegate? Or are you really spending the time on the things that really fall under your scope of responsibilities? And especially over the years, right? We call it scope creep. All of a sudden, this was my responsibility, but now they've added this and this and this and this and this. Time to take a look at all of that. What are those expectations that your leader has for you? Where do you have opportunities to delegate in that arena?
That's a good point. A good point. I think a lot of leaders can appreciate that because there's always something else. As you grow and your company grows, then there's always going to be other additional things we need to add on. And so going back to this exercise is really helpful.
Yeah. And I think another thing that could fall under this is one of the examples of working with an executive recently was, well, I don't like to close my door. I want everybody to think that I'm accessible all the time. And I said, really? Well, is that your responsibility to be accessible all the time? Like, when do you think? When do you take time to really think about your responsibilities? It could be little things like that. It's really distracting and sucking up that precious time that you have to do your job.
That's such a mindset shift because that's more of like a psychological issue, right? Because why are you attached to the idea that your door needs to be open in order for your people to feel like you are available to them? Whereas, oh no, I know that this person needs time, whatever they're doing, and they don't need to know whatever it is that you're spending your time, whether it's thinking or working on a project or whatever it is, because we all know those moments in time when you're so in the zone and you're focused, and then someone pops in and just kind of completely gets you out of it. And then it takes you 10, 20 minutes to really get back into the zone. And so that does not serve you. And then it also does not serve the team. So if we can flip that idea that the door closed is a bad thing and like, no, it's a good thing. And you're also empowering your people. We hear from leaders, managers all the time where they'll say, this person used to come into my office all the time. And then I did office hours or whatever it was. And then all of a sudden, the amount of times that the employees actually needed the leader decreased. Why? Because a lot of the stuff they could have figured out on their own. It really wasn't a huge deal. But the fact that there was so much access to that person, they always just, hey, I'm going to pop in. I'm going to ask you a question real quick. No, empower your people to make the decisions that you don't need to be involved with and then move on so that you get what you need and your people get what they need.
Absolutely. This particular example, I asked the question, who comes the most to interrupt you? So she was able to identify that there was one person in particular. And I said, when is there a time that you could meet with that person so that they could save all of those questions that they have for you for one 30-minute conversation versus interrupting you all week? So that ended up being a good idea for her. So she really found all those little things, because sometimes it's not one big thing, it's a lot of little things that can give you time back. And falling under, what is my responsibility as the leader? So you're focused back in on that.
That's what I love about coaching, Michele, is because you say it and it's almost, of course. It's like, obviously, that would be a better solution. But when we're in it, we don't see it. This is why having a coaching conversation is so impactful, because as the coach, as a third party person, you're thinking, wait, what a simple question to ask. And then what an easy solution.
Absolutely. Number 3 is one of my favorites, and we use this in a lot of different coaching. And this is the time and energy inventory. So literally taking the time to journal, where are you spending your time today? And don't sugarcoat it. Be real. Like, what are you spending your time on every single day, and do it for a week? Do it for 2 weeks. Really look at that, and you will be amazed at where you're wasting time. Then the next step is, say you do it for a week. How would you like that week to look different? What are those things? Where are you wasting time? That's the time part of the inventory. The other part is, what is your energy like? Are you a morning person? Are you an afternoon person? When do you do your best thinking? Are you really doing the activities during your high energy times? I'll use me as an example. I am a morning person. I wake up and I could write a poem. I have such clarity in the morning. However, if you ask me something really important at 3 or 4 o'clock, oh no, it's not happening. So being aware of that, what do? I make sure that I do that level of brain work in the mornings.
And she's not lying because I have come into her office at 4 and she said, "No, I don't. Nope, you're not gonna get the best of me."
Yeah. But being aware of that is huge. It's a huge opportunity for you to really look at those high energy activities. Where am I spending my time? And just that exercise alone has been amazing for so many executives. And then establishing that clear schedule. Pick one little boundary you want to make, whether it's blocking out think time for yourself. Every Tuesday from 9 to 11, that's my think time. And you guard that as your non negotiable. That's your time. That will make such a difference if you could just start with one little boundary that you put in place for yourself. So, really looking at setting your limits or being more specific. I had one person, one executive, not getting out on time. So I said, okay, how can we start? Small step. So Wednesdays, out the door at 5 o'clock, non negotiable. I'm doing it. She's now up to 3 days a week. I said, how has that affected your work, your productivity? She goes, I think I'm better because I put that boundary in place. And now when someone tries to waste my time on Wednesday, I won't let them because I'm leaving at 5 o'clock. And then Thursday, same thing started to happen. So it started to change her habits without really focusing on changing her habit, if that makes sense. But it was just setting that boundary helped to really look at all those other pieces of her day.
Yeah, we can read all the listicles all day, how to be more productive, how to set boundary, all the things, but until you start to make those strategic moves yourself, then we don't experience that. And being able to do it one simple step. All you have to do is leave on time one day. And then she came to the conclusion, wow, I'm really more strategic with my time on Wednesdays because I know I have to leave by 5. Like I have a deadline. I love that this stuff is experiential and it also are these baby steps to help push us forward in that direction.
Yeah. And that's just one example. I think the key is what you said, start one simple step because what's going to happen is you're going to become more conscious of your time and your energy and where are you squandering it. And then you can get back to Matthew's 4 questions, right? What kind of life do you want to live? Because you do have that control over time and energy. And then last but certainly not least is self-care. So what happens when work gets really busy, we start to push our own self-care, things that we know we need to do physically, mentally, whatever, push that down, down, down. What does that do to us as a professional? That's what adds the stress. Then the things that normally wouldn't bother you, maybe you get a little more sensitive about because you're not doing those things that you need in your life in terms of self-care. So that was another example of a client who he just couldn't find time to exercise. So one of the things that we ended up saying or talking about was, what if you went to work 30 minutes later? Would your productivity go down? Would your effectiveness go down? He was just looking for 30 minutes. If you could just find 30 minutes, you would be disciplined enough to put that back into your schedule. So that's what he ended up doing, was adjusting his start time. Made such a difference in who he was when he got to work. He was turning into the grumpy and literally said to me, I'm much more sensitive now all of a sudden. And that's when we started digging. And that's what was changing, was he was doing less and less of self-care or, his physical routine or, anything else. And I find that a lot with people, right? So as work takes on more activity, let's say, you really have to guard your self-care because you want to be able to bring your best to both places.
Yeah, it's so interesting how we feel guilty for self care instead of realizing how important it is, that it's not just a nicety. It actually helps us with all of the other areas of our life, especially when it comes to exercise and movement. And even if it's just going and getting a walk 15 minutes, whatever it is, it goes back to what can you do? Let's not focus on what you can't do all week. What can you commit to doing every week and then start with that. And we've got to remember that it's those things, self-care is not a nicety. It should be on that list of priorities of these are things that I need to be the best mother, father, team member, leader, whatever it is that you're doing in your world, we need those things. And so it becomes that mindset shift too, not to feel guilty about it. And I love that you talked about boundaries, and that is a boundary, right? It's like when we put those things in our calendar, they are there for a reason. Stick with them. And so often when we have self-care things in our calendar, they're the first to go when we have to put out a fire or things start to happen. And we just are so easy to take that off the calendar versus other things in our life, which at the end of the day, if you really think about it, probably does not serve you or the people around you.
No, not at all. I mean, sleep is another one. Some executives view sleep as a weakness.
I used to be one of those people who are always bragging about, oh, I can get 4 hours of sleep and I wake up at 4 in the morning and I work out and I do all the things. And it's been fascinating to learn so much more about sleep. I've read all these different books on sleep and everything that it does for us. And then obviously, Ariana Huffington, she started her company Thrive, and that was based off of something that happened to her because of so many years of lack of sleep. And so it's been interesting to see this movement now of helping people recognize the importance of sleep, what it does for us, and to not act as though being able to get up and run on 2 hours of sleep is good. Just because you can have more hours to work does not mean you are going to do any better.
Absolutely. So, yeah, so those are the 5 things to get you started in terms of boundaries.
This was such a jam-packed episode, as they always are when you come on, Michele, because you love digging into the tough questions, the powerful questions that really help people think about life a little bit differently, think about how they've been moving in the world a little bit differently, which is really important, especially today. I think there is so much content. We are fed so many resources, so much information, and I think it can feel very overwhelming to make a difference in our lives. And we often do focus so much on the things we can't control that we forget how much of our lives we can. And this is what I love about talking to you, because you really help people recognize we're talking about the things you can control and who you can become. And that is exciting. And that puts people in this place of empowerment where they can say, hey, I have the tools, the resources necessary to really grow in my leadership role, in as a spouse, as a father, mother, wherever you are in life. And so the call to action would be for people to not just listen and be done, but actually write down those questions that Michele said and take some time. Block it out in your calendar for some self care or some think time when you close your office and you're not feeling guilty about it. And you really spend time digging into some of these questions. And maybe you can't do all 4 of them. Maybe you have 15 minutes. Great. You have 5 minutes. Awesome. Focus on one of those questions and then do another one another day this week or next week. It's all about what can you do, not what you can't.
Absolutely. And the time and energy inventory. Highly recommend that. That's so eye opening. It's so eye opening.
Yes. And if you have not read Off Balance by Matthew Kelly, it's very short and very powerful. And those exercises are actually in the book, so you can kind of navigate through them on your own. So definitely pick up a copy of Off Balance. And then also, if you are interested in having a coach, if you're thinking, I would love to focus on this stuff, but I just don't make the time. Well, guess what? If you have a coach, you have a 1 hour dedicated to talking about you, your business, your life, whatever it is that you want to focus on. It's all about you. That's what it is. It's about what you want to talk about. And so who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want to have, 50 minutes to themselves to talk about their favorite topic?
And create a plan.
Yes. To create a foolproof, beautiful plan that one of our coaches will hold you accountable to, because that's the biggest reason things don't get done. We don't accomplish things because we're not holding ourselves accountable. We let ourselves off the hook way too easily. And so having a coach really pushes us to become the best version of ourselves. Michele, thank you so much for joining this episode today. Always a pleasure chatting with you.
It's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for listening. We so appreciate you. We really do love doing the show. We hope you found some value in this. And listen, if you feel like someone in your life, in your world, whether that's a colleague, a friend, a spouse, whoever is really having a little bit of a time and struggling and trying to figure out, hey, I really do want to find more of that work-life balance. And what does that even mean? We would love to chat with you about coaching and what coaching will do for your life. So you can go to floydcoaching.com and someone on our team is going to reach out to you to have that conversation. And we appreciate you. Thanks for listening to the show. And until next time, lead with culture.